Hello everyone! Welcome to my Wood Elf DLC overview video. In this one I'm going to be covering all of the units for the Wood Elves, Legendary Lords, normal units, all that stuff. I'm going to have a few videos showing different mock battles, showing off the two different lores of Life and Shadow that were introduced in here. Going to go over the Beastmen additions at the end, which would be the Harpies and the new Legendary Lord. Also some other random stuff, patch notes stuff, and some campaign stuff. Not much campaign stuff, but I'll put that at the very end, just kind of show you what to expect when you can dive into the Wood Elf DLC. There are a lot of units to cover in this, so let's start with the basic Glade Lord. The Glade Lord comes with a Forest Stalker trait, which is going to be a trait that is shared amongst most of the land-based Elven units. What Forest Stalker does, it grants any unit in a forest with this trait 10% increased movement speed and 50% increased accuracy. That is what the Forest Stalker trait will grant you, so just keep that in mind when you see Forest Stalker popping up in other units down the line. The stats here, 50 armor is not crazy. The pool of hit points for the Glade Lord is not very high, so they are going to be kind of squishy, but the leadership is decent. Speed of 48 makes them very fast for an unmounted unit. 48 is huge. The melee attack and defense are really great for any unit in the game. 69 melee attack and 59 melee defense is a very damaging and defensive focused unit. The problem here being, though, when it does get hit, the 50 armor is not going to resist much, and the pool of hit points of only 2600 makes this a pretty squishy lord. But they do still have decent weapon strength, but on top of this, they are an archer with a range of 160. Their magical attacks, magical ammunition, I should say, and their missile damage is very, very high. Very high. So if they get engaged in melee, they can hang on for a little bit and deal some damage back, but the mixture of their high melee stats and the fact that they have a bow and a speed of 48, so they can run very fast, outrun most units in the game, well, land-based units like infantry, makes this a pretty cool and unique addition to the Total Warhammer game. On top of this, the abilities that the Glade Lord has is going to be Call of the Woods, which grants them an 8 bonus to melee attack for himself and any units around him. So he's going to be the melee-focused Glade Lord, because there are 2 Glade Lords in this game. On top of that, we also have Foe Seeker and Deadly Onslaught. For the mount options here, we have an Elven Steed, which is going to make them much more mobile, with a 95 in speed, charge bonus in addition of plus 15, and hit point addition of over 400, most likely 400. So this is going to make them a kiting monster, basically, because also what it grants them is going to be this fire whilst moving. So on this seat, they have a 360-degree firing arc, and they can just kite almost anything in the game, because there's not many things that are faster than 95. This is going to be a very annoying army for people who do not enjoy being kited. So just keep that in mind. Then the next mount we have is a Giant Eagle, which is going to grant this Glade Lord ability to fly on an awesome looking bird. The stat change here, speed of 110, which is going to make this, I believe, the fastest thing in the game are going to be the Giant Eagles, because with the patch that's hitting with this DLC, the Pegasus units are being decreased in speed by 5. So they're going to have 105 movement speed, so the Wood Elves are going to be the fastest race, technically, in the game with their Giant Eagles here. On top of that, it grants them an even higher charge bonus and an increase in weapon strength for melee. And on top of all of that, they still fire whilst moving, and they have access to their bow for 500 additional gold. Very cool. And then for 750, you get a Forest Dragon. The Forest Dragon is going to share this Forest Spirit trait with the most of the Dryad and Woodsman units in this game. And what Forest Spirit does, it usually grants them magical attacks and a physical resistance of 20%. On top of that, the armor for this lord is going to go up to 70. The leadership is still 70, speed of 90, melee attack of 58, but it is also going to be poison and now armor piercing. On top of that being magical, and they still have access to their bow and fire whilst moving. They also grant terror and fear because of the Forest Dragon. I also forgot to mention the Giant Eagle causes fear as well. It does not cause terror, but it does cause fear. And then the Forest Dragon is going to cause both fear and terror. So, this lord, which is very cheap, can potentially be really brutal, but it is going to cost you a pretty penny, putting him up to an 1800 in cost on the Forest Dragon. But if you want to dominate the skies, which against certain factions like the Empire and Bretonnia, I would say spend the extra money, get the Glade Lord, and you're going to have a better chance at ruling the skies, which the Wood Elves is going to be pretty good at. So the second of the two Glade Lords, the cost increase, not that much, but I feel like she is going to be the better of the two. The differences are only lie in their abilities. The actual stats of both of these lords are the same, but their big change is going to be in the abilities. So she comes with the Eye of Kurnios, which her and units around her will be granted a +12 bonus to their missile damage. Then she also comes with the Arrow of Kurnios, which every 90 seconds, and by the way, you have this at the very start of the battle. This isn't on cooldown. You have it at the very start. 350 range. It has penetration. It's like a magic missile that causes armor-piercing damage at a 350 range. Now, for this one, I did a couple tests. It seems to be more potent when you're either on the Elven Steed or unmounted, because the angle that the magic missile hits the enemy unit makes it kind of do more penetration. But I noticed that if you cast it while flying, in most cases, the magic missile is angled in a way that it's more like a downward angle, so it doesn't have as much penetration. Still a really cool unit, especially since it's free. It doesn't take any Winds of Magic. It's on a 90-second cooldown. It's amazing. And then also on top of that, she has Prey of Anathrema. So every 90 seconds, she can cast this 31-second duration Hex at 150 range, decreases missile resistance by 22%, and the unit cannot move. Cannot move for 31 seconds. 31 seconds. The cost difference between her and the normal Glade Lord, I don't know, it seems insane to me, because she kind of seems like the better of the two. But besides the abilities, the mounts are the same, her items are the same as the Glade Lord. By the way, sorry, they both have access to these potions. And real quick, the Potion of Toughness, the amount that it heals has been lowered by about 50%, I believe. And now no hero in the game has access to Potion of Toughness. Only Lords do now, so keep that in mind. But yeah, of these two Glade Lords, like, unless you really want a melee-focused build, and you really want this person's Call of the Woods ability, the 8 additional melee attack, then sure, okay, maybe bring the Glade Lord. But she just seems so much better, because the amount of damage, I'm going to show you in a video later, just how much the Arrow of Kurnios does, the buff to missile units around her, and then the fact that she can stop an enemy unit for 31 seconds. You're probably going to see her a lot out of these two. So that is going to be the other Glade Lord. Again, besides the abilities, the stats are the same. Just the ability changes. Then we move on to Orion. This is a cool looking dude. So Orion has no mount options, but he doesn't need him. He throws an awesome javelin at a very long range. It looks pretty sweet. So stat wise, he has over 5,000 hit points, which is pretty beefy. Armor of 30, not that high. He is unbreakable with a, well, he's unbreakable with the abilities here, but it shows 100 leadership here. Speed of 56, so he is really fast. His melee attack of 65 is magical, and 65 is really high. Melee defense of 30 is kind of low, so he is looking to be a little kind of a glass, what is it, glass cannon, that's the term, glass cannon, because he has a 490 weapon strength. 310 of that is going to be armor piercing, and with such a high melee attack, he's going to be getting a lot of hits off. Then on top of that, he has a 65 charge bonus and a ranged attack at a range of 140, which is also focused on armor piercing, with 116 of that being armor piercing. So he can weaken the enemy unit. He can, in theory, kite a lot of units with a speed of 56. And then when he is engaged in melee, he does have a decent amount of hit points. His armor is low. His melee defense is low. So against other lords that are more melee focused, you know, like Grimgor, Grombrindle and all that, they can win, but he is deceptively tanky because of, where is it? Well, he potentially can be. With this item, the Cloak of Isha, for 200, when his health drops below 20%, he gains a 44% damage resistance to everything. So he is deceptively tanky. He's going to be a little harder to kill when you get him below that 20% health, and since he's unbreakable, well, he's not going to run away ever. So if you get the Cloak of Isha, he's going to be, again, deceptively tanky. This guy is pretty sweet. On top of that, his other abilities, he has access to Frenzy. He also has access to Foe Seeker. Then we have Hawk's Talon, which is a bombard spell. It does okay damage. And then the Hounds of Orion works kind of like the Metal Lore's Hound spell, but he can cast this every 45 seconds. This is not taking away from your Winds of Magic at all. This is just an ability he has at 150 range. It's pretty powerful. to just have a free hound spell every 45 seconds, and then on top of that, every 90 seconds have a free bombardment spell. Very powerful, especially with the kiting focus that the Wood Elves have. They can just run around for days, and then just kite you with spells and their range attacks. So Orion, I think, is, I'm going to say, worth the cost of 1920, and especially is worth the cost if you give him the Cloak of Isha. And before we move on, I should also show the Horn of the Wild Hunt. Kind of a big deal. So map-wide buff of speed and charge bonus for 200. Now this is not this is on cooldown at the start of the battle, so you will not have access to this ability for 135 seconds into the battle. So you gotta just kind of be mindful of that. But that is a potentially a huge buff for an additional 200 in cost. So he definitely cool. Will require a lot of multiplayer testing to see how effective he is against other human players. But right now I'm gonna say he looks awesome. He throws a javelin. He's just badass. Listen, he has the cool factor. So that is Orion, the first of 2 legendary lords. The second is going to be Durthu, which we'll get to here in a moment. Next we have the Ancient Treeman, who is going to be a hybrid melee giant fighter who also can cast magic. For the stats here, we have 100 armor, 5,600 health. This is a very tanky caster. 85 leadership, speed of 36, which is still pretty fast, melee attack of 37, but he is also magical attacks if you need magical attacks, melee defense of 48. Neither of these stats are particularly high, but this is a caster, a very tanky caster, so it's still pretty good. And a weapon strength of 400, and he has kind of a high disruptive attacks because it is a giant. Pretty cool looking unit, and awesome to see a caster that is also super tanky. There is a downside though. Let's quickly go over. He does have physical resistance of 20% on top of the 100% armor, or I'm sorry, 100 armor. So again, very tanky, right? Also missile resistance, but he does have a weakness. Fire weakness of minus 40%. It's kind of high, but I have tested one of the most effective fire-based spells that you can use to snipe heroes and lords is going to be Fireball. But even with this fire weakness, and even with Kindle Flame, even casting Fireball directly above this guy so he gets hit by the Fireball and the explosion damage, he still does not take much damage because of his high armor. Fireball works really well against low armored units, but against the 100 armor, even through his flame weakness, it doesn't really do that much damage. So he's not really going to be susceptible to that kind of hero sniping. Now he is going to be susceptible to, let's say, if you cast the flame spell, Flaming Sword of Ruin, I think it's called, that grants units fire damage, then that's a problem. So you still have to be aware of the fire casters in the game, but not because of their fireball spell, but because of their buff that they can grant other units that can really damage them. So that is a downside of him. But besides that, this is a very cool unit. Let's go over his abilities. He has Blessing of the Ancients, which is going to improve your power recharge rate while you are in a forest, specifically. So instead of every 6 seconds you getting 1 power, it's going to be every 3 seconds. And from what I can tell, this is going to be able to stack with other Blessings of the Ancients that other units have in this game. So while you're in a forest, potentially you can gain a lot of your reserve pretty quickly. He also has Life Bloom because he has access to the Life Lore, which is one of the new lores in the game. Life Bloom, map-wide, as long as you're casting, you're going to be granting a 10-second buff to all of your friendly units that's going to replenish their health in combat. It's really cool to have a map-wide 10-second regen buff for every unit in the game, or, well, that's on your side. Besides that, he also grants access to Foe Seeker and Deadly Onslaught. For the spells, let's dive into the lores here. So, we have Awakening of the Wood, a very cheap spell with a low cooldown. The magical damage that it causes is not high at all. Not high at all. But the minus 48 speed debuff that the units will get for 12 seconds is kind of cool. But you gotta remember that when this kind of spammable low-cost spell teamed up with the Life Bloom, that's not bad, because remember, every time you cast a spell, this Life Bloom is triggering, and all of your units are healing for 10 seconds. So, while the actual damage is not high, because I've tested it multiple times, not that high, the speed debuff is really cool, and the Life Bloom synergy is really cool. Next, we have Earthblood. This is going to be an AoE for 14 seconds, kind of like an Invocation of Nehek for 8 mana. If you overcast it for an additional 3 mana, you get 28 seconds of healing instead of 14. But you also do have to beware, miscast chance of 50%, so you could damage your own caster, but still, that's pretty cool. Then we have Flesh to Stone, which is going to be the basic ability, plus 30 armor to a single ally for 27 seconds. You can overcast it for an additional 4 mana and grant them 45 armor for 27 seconds. Now, I don't know if this overcast is really worth it. The additional 15 in armor, at the risk of hurting your own caster, for just 15, I mean, if you really want to, sure. Throw it on one of your lords if they're fighting another enemy lord in melee. Give them the best chance that they have to win that combat if you really want to, but that's kind of a risk for a little gain. Next, we have Shield of Thorns, the base cast of 9 power cost. This is going to be an AoE buff spell for 20 seconds, a 45-meter range, which is pretty high. You can usually hit like 3 or 4 units with this. 22% weapon damage increase and 22% missile resistance increase. Overcast that for an additional 5 mana, you get a 44% weapon damage increase and 44% missile resistance for 20 seconds. Again, miscast chance you could hurt your own caster. So for 14 mana, up to usually about 3, maybe 4 units are going to have a additional 44% weapon damage for 20 seconds. Listen, that's a lot of damage, my friends. Also, the missile resistance is pretty cool too. Then we have Regrowth. This is going to be a single target spell at the base cost of 12 mana. It's going to grant them 22% physical resistance and will replenish their hit points for 33 seconds. This is another ability that you would want to cast on very important units that are in important fights, like your Glade Lord fighting an Empire Lord on a Griffin, you know, like very crucial battles. Throw this on your Lord. They're going to get their hit points back. They're going to have their physical resistance. You can also overcast it for 17 and then grant them 44% physical resistance and an even greater hit to their regen. So again, if you really need to win a specific battle, because 17 mana is a lot to ask, but if you really need to win that air battle or a ground battle somewhere, throw this on the unit. 44% physical resistance is no joke. No joke at all. For 33 seconds, that's a huge buff. Huge buff. Then we have the Dwellers Below, which is going to be a direct damage spell, AoE, for 15 seconds. You're going to cause damage to the units inside. From what I've seen, most cases, it doesn't really do that much. Like, you typically get more damage out of a Flock of Doom spell. But on top of this, the units inside the AoE are going to be continually hit with this debuff, which is going to slow them. As long as they remain within the area of effect, this is just going to kind of keep reprocking for 3 seconds, the Dwellers Below thing. You can overcast it to get an extended range of 400 meters, but in my test, like, the damage really hasn't been that high. So spending 21 mana to basically slow enemy units and get some damage here and there, I don't know. I'll do more testing with it, but that seems really expensive. But this is the life lore, so, you know, it kind of figures their damaging abilities or maybe are not that great. So now we're going to take a quick break from showing you all the units. I'm actually going to show you a video that shows off some of the life lore abilities. So there was a brief look at some of the life lore in action along with the War Dancers and Wildwood Rangers. So next we're going to move on to the second legendary lord, Durthu, which is going to be another giant tree man. Stat-wise, 100 armor, 90 leadership, 36 speed. Very good melee attack and defense stats for a lord here, because he is also a spellcaster on top of this. 430 weapon strength, most of that focused on armor piercing damage, and then a 40 charge bonus. Has no mounts because he's a giant tree, although it'd be pretty cool to see a giant tree mounted on a giant dragon. That'd be pretty sweet. But abilities, we have the Wild Heart, which increases to power reserve. We also have access to Blessing of the Ancients, which you've seen in other units. Frenzy on top of all of this, which is going to be a pretty big buff to weapon damage, considering he has what, like 380? Oh no, I guess it's only 80. Still, Frenzy's cool. Foe Seeker, and then also the Lamentation of Despair, which is going to be a magic missile you can target on an enemy unit. It does do decent armor piercing damage, and hey, it's a free magic missile spell for 90 seconds. It's actually not that bad. For spell-wise, he has access to the lore of beasts. So there you go. The Wood Elves have access to Shadow, Life, and the lore of beasts. Lore of beasts is always very useful. We have 2 transformations of Kadan out of the lore of beasts now. These summons have been changed. That's one of the big changes in this patch notes, which again I'm going to link below in the description. But real quick, the units that you summon are going to be continually dying with a trait called Unbinding. So maybe that's why they added a second possible cast of Transformation of Kadan. Oddly enough though, Lore of the Wild, if we jump into that just very briefly, the Savage Dominion, you still only get 1 cast out of that. But for some reason you get 2 out of the Transformation of Kadan. Now I didn't use this that much, but I'm pretty sure you only had 1 before this patch. I'm like 90% sure. But anyway, so he has access to the Lore of Beasts, and then for his special item, he gets the Sword of Daith? This is a pretty cool ability. So it does direct damage in the 30-meter area around him for 15 seconds. Also decreases enemy armor by 15 for 15 seconds. An AoE around him, so you get him into melee, you pop that thing on, and then everything is taking direct damage that is fighting around him. So that is a pretty cool ability. Also his sword looks pretty badass, which I'm assuming that's what this is. So yeah, Lore of Beasts, very more like a melee focused caster, but super expensive. When you get the sword, we're looking at what, over 3,000 for Durthu. But of course you can also lower that. You can get the spells that most everyone else gets. Flock of Doom is still super strong, and then you can also get the Transformation of Kadan if you really want it. Or you can just mess around with these other spells. Now that you're messing around with the Wood Elves, you can give Wistion's Wild Form to yourself. Yeah, do what you do. But if I would always say, keep Flock of Doom, because it's an insanely good spell. So if you take all the spells off, you can get them down to 2,400. If you just keep Flock of Doom, if you get Transformation of Kadan, 2,600 is definitely not bad for what you're getting in this unit. He is a scary, scary big tree man. Very scary big tree man. Next, we're going to move on to the heroes, starting with the Waystalker. Waystalker is another kind of glass cannon, a very low set of hit points. He does have 4 Stalker. He is a master ambusher, and man, he's pretty cool. Let's dive into his stats here. 40 armor, not that high. 60 leadership, also not that high. Speed of 42, pretty good for a unit that's not on a mount. 38 melee attack and 42 melee defense makes it so that he can survive in combat with kind of lower quality units. But if any like anti-hero unit gets on him, he's going to have a very, very rough day. Weapon strength of 310. His main thing is going to be his archery. So he has a 30 ammunition magical damage, range of 160, very high weapon or missile damage, just kind of like the Glade Lords do. But what's unique about this guy is that he has this snipe ability. He remains hidden while firing. Yeah, because he has stalk. And as long as he is not within, I think it's 50 meters, maybe 60 meters, no one's going to be able to see him. So he's just going to be sniping units. And since he's so mobile, if someone goes kind of towards where he's heading or where he is, you can just move him pretty quickly, just reposition him. It's kind of silly, but also pretty cool. So yeah, the snipe ability is something he has. The other things he has, Hawkish Precision. As long as there are no enemy units around him within a 70-meter area, his armor piercing missile damage is increased by 25%. So his base is what? 84. So that will be increased by 25%. Again, as long as no one is around him. And then he also has the Arrow of Kernios, kind of like the Glade Lord does. Yeah, and then access to potions, but not the Potion of Toughness, well, because that has been taken away for all heroes. So, listen, I'm not saying you should do this, but potion of strength on a unit that can snipe, fire, and remain hidden. Just saying, that may be a decent idea. Before we move on, I decided to record a silly episode showing, or not episode, but a silly video here showing the potential damage output of the Arrow of Kurnos on 4 Way Stalkers and then a Glade Lord, because in the quick match, the quick battles, you can only bring 4 heroes, so I limited it to 4. So let's watch that real quick.
Ready and eager.
As you said, by your command, right away. Following orders at once. I will. Hunter. Right away.
Ever ready. Slay them.
Ready. At once.
Lady of Athel Lauren. Ready to hunt. As you say. Lady of the Azray, the forest calls.
Hiding in wait. I will.
Azray warrior. Battle ready and eager. I will fly.
As you say. Storm hunter. Right away. Following orders. I will.
Child of Kurnos. Lady of Athel Lauren. Lady of the Deepwood. Swiftly.
So obviously that is just like a little mock battle I made against the AI, but you can kind of see at least the damage potential of, at the very beginning of a match, since these people can also Vanguard deploy, just how much that Arrow of Kurnos can do to very high armored units, because its range of 350 is huge, and you can just kite your entire army back and just keep it's going to be annoying to deal with. But also, that's a funny video. So we're going to move on here to the Branch Wraith, which is going to be kind of a unique caster melee hybrid. Armor of 30, leadership of 60, speed of 38, the melee attack of 47, but once again magical attacks because they are a forest spirit, and with forest spirit comes also physical resistance of 20%. So even though they have a low armor, they still do have a pretty high physical resistance, as physical resistance goes. Decent weapon strength considering this is a caster, and a charge bonus of 32. Ability wise, they also have the Blessing of the Ancients, which again, from what I've tested, it seems to stack with other Blessing of the Ancients, so you can get mana really quickly. They also come with Smoke and Mirrors, which is a shadow caster buff. So it's a map wide buff, 6% speed increase to all of your friendly units constantly. They also have Call of the Woods, which grants you that 8 melee attack, kind of like what the male Glade Lord has, and then also Foe Seeker. On top of that, they have a mixture of the 2 new lores, the Life lore and the Shadow lore. So they come with the Awakening of the Wood, the Earth Blood, which is the AoE regeneration, the Shield of Thorns, which we've all seen. They also have the Melkal's Mystifying Miasma, which we're going to cover here in a little bit, the Penumbral Pendulum, and the Withering ability here. And again, we're going to cover that in just a little bit. For items, they have access to the scrolls. So next we are going to move on to the 3 Spellsingers. We have the Spellsinger of Beasts, Shadows, and Life. She casts the Beasts lore, Shadow lore, and the Life lore. So for her abilities, she has the Wild Heart, the Blessing of the Ancients, and Arcane Conduit. She has access to the scrolls. Her spells are the Lore Beast spells, and her mount options for all 3 Spellsingers are going to be the Elven Steed and Unicorn, which is going to make them a little bit more mobile, more durable with higher hit points, higher charge bonus, but also grants them access to a Fear Aura if you want some more fear in your army. And then she can also fly on a Giant Eagle, which is pretty cool, but makes her a very terrible melee combatant as soon as her charge bonus wears off anyway. But, you know, it grants access to flying if you want that. So not really going to cover too much with the Beast Lord because, well, we already know the Beast Lord. So let's move on to the Spellsinger of Shadows. For her abilities, she's going to have the Blessing of the Ancients, the Smoke and Mirrors, so that's going to be the map-wide speed buff, and Arcane Conduit. She has access to the spells, or I'm sorry, to the magical scrolls. For the spells for the Lord of Shadows, let's dive in here. Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma, a direct damage spell for 5 Winds of Magic. This does about as much damage as like a Devolve does. So not that much, but it's only 5 Winds of Magic. It's a pretty quick cooldown, and it does lower the speed of the enemy unit. But when you overcast it for 10 mana, the damage that it does is about double the amount of a Devolve, maybe even slightly higher. Not necessarily sure if it's worth it quite yet in my testing, but you have the option there. Next, we have the Enfeebling Foe, which is going to be a really cool hex. For 10 mana, you lower an enemy unit's melee attack and defense for 24 seconds. If you put additional 3 mana into that, it's going to increase the duration to 48 seconds. So if you really need to win a battle against an enemy lord, Gorbul, Royal Altdorf Griffites, you know, throw this on them, and for 48 seconds, potentially for 13 mana, their stats are going to be lowered significantly, which is going to give you a really high edge. Next, we have a wind spell, the Penumbral Pendulum. It's very expensive. You can get a lot of work done if you cast it kind of like a Winds of Death and you cast it along an enemy's line. You can get some decent amount of work, but for the most part, I would stay away from the wind spells. But hey, give it a shot. Maybe you'll like it more than I do. I think it's really expensive. Next, we have the Withering, which is going to be another hex for 31 seconds. You lower an enemy unit's armor and leadership. You can overcast this for an additional 3 mana to get an area of effect. So if your caster can withstand the amount of damage from a miscast chance, I would say spend the additional 3 mana and lower an enemy unit's like line of armor and leadership. It's a pretty cool hex spell. Then we have the Pit of Shades, which is an awesome vortex spell. Let's just look at this here. The actual graphic. That looks awesome. Not only does it look awesome, it stays in place. It's a vortex spell that does not move. So whatever unit is caught in that is going to take damage for 13 seconds. And let me tell you, especially when you overcast it for an additional 3 mana with the armor piercing damage increase, it can deal a lot of damage. It is insane how much damage it can deal. It's a really cool looking spell and somewhat effective as well, which makes it really awesome. Then we have Occam's Mind Razor, or Occam's Mind Razor. This is going to be an augment spell for 32 seconds. You imbue a unit with magical damage, and also 44% weapon damage and armor piercing damage increase for 32 seconds. If you spend an additional 3 mana, you can have that be an AoE buff. This, well, it costs a lot of Winds of Magic, but can definitely be worth it to buff up, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 units, however many units you can get into this 45-meter area, and give them all nearly 50% increase to their armor piercing and weapon damage. It's a pretty huge buff that Lord Shadows has, and pretty awesome. So with that being said, let's actually jump into another video here showing off some of the Shadow Lore and other units of the Wood Elf army fighting again in another mock battle against the AI.
Our bows are yours! Advance! Fall back! Your command! We accept!
As they may.
Sibla. Avis. Avis.
Armed and ready! Children
Your
of Orion!
orders.
They seek to undo us with magic!
Cast back the darkness. Swiftly.
Noem Avis.
Deep word archers!
Zakas Durthu.
Get ready! Protectors of the forest! At speed! Wild riders! Blade guard! Yes!
Durthu.
Wind weaver.
Warriors of Ariel!
Hekasi, bless me.
Ever ready! Trample them! As you say! Armed and ready! First up! With peace! Your command! My colonel! Cavalry! Quickly! Hunters! Wild riders! Our magic will destroy them!
Orders.
So we also got to see some Durthu action in that video, and man, the shadow spells, they look, I'm in love with that vortex spell. What was it called again? Pit of Shades. It just looks awesome. It's just this giant like tear in the fabric of reality, and it looks really cool. And then for the last one, we have the Spellsinger of Life. Oops, I just canceled you out. She has the same mount options, same stats as the other two Spellsingers, and her abilities are going to kind of reflect the Ancient Treeman because she has access to that Life Bloom. So if you don't have the Ancient Treeman and you still want AoE map-wide regeneration, you can get her with the Life Bloom ability. She also has the Blessing of the Ancients, Arcane Conduit, and access to all of the Lore of Life spells. So there you go. Access to the Lore of Life at a cheaper cost than the Ancient Treeman. Pretty cool. In my test so far, in a non-multiplayer environment, I dig the Shadows and the Life lore. I like nearly almost all of the spells for both of them. Again, in a non-multiplayer environment. We'll have to see when this patch goes, worldwide, and I can actually test these against other human opponents, see how effective they really are. So those are going to be all of the heroes and the lords / legendary lords. We get to dive into the mainstay of the Wood Elves, which is going to be, well, their actual units. So we're going to start with, let's get these off here, the Eternal Guard. For 500, this is going to be your most basic of infantry. We have Forest Stalker trait, which again, to remind you, 10% increased movement speed, 50% increased accuracy while in a forest. They are an anti-large unit because they have a spear. They do have charged defense against large foes if you need that. Something to keep in mind here, though. This may be the mainstay in infantry, but they only have 75 models to the unit on large unit sizes, which is the basic unit size for quick battles. So they have less than, I believe, all other factions in the game, like their mainstay infantry, like their Ungor herds, their spearmen at arms, have 90, orc boys have 90, empire swordsmen 90. You see the theme here. So they do have less models, so they're not as tankier, or, well, they don't have as high as hit points. They are slightly tankier than some of the other infantry in the game because they do have 40 armor, which is really nice. They have a very high leadership of 80, so they're going to stick into combat a little bit longer. They are a little bit more resistant to fear and terror because of their higher leadership. Speed of 35 is higher than most other land-based units in the game, except like maybe Beastmen. Melee attack of 26 and melee defense of 36 is not that bad for a basic unit of infantry. And this is kind of where it's unique. They have a focus against armor piercing on top of the bonus versus large. So yes, these do cost more than most other spearmen in the game, but there's not many other spearmen in the game, or any at all, that have armor piercing damage for a basic infantry unit. So that's kind of unique. Charge bonus of 8, and then they can also hide in the forest. So they may not have as many models, but just because they can have armor piercing damage on top of decent melee stats and a very high leadership, and 40 armor is not that bad. Higher than Bretonnians and like Empire infantry has. They're a pretty cool unit for 500. Then for 550, we move on to the Dryads, which is going to be designated as creature infantry. They are not large creatures, so don't worry about them getting any kind of bonus versus or from spearmen. They also have a 75 in unit size, so they are about as durable as the Eternal Guard. But they also have a lower leadership. They have a slightly higher speed, magical attacks. Their melee attack and defense is going to be lower than the Eternal Guard. Their weapon strength is going to be only a 33, which is not terrible. Charge bonus of 14 again, which is not terrible. But on top of that, they do cause fear. So for 550, you get a pretty decent melee unit that causes fear. It's kind of a huge thing, especially against armies like Bretonnia and like Greenskins that have problems with leadership. That's pretty cool. They also have a physical resistance of 20% because they are forest spirits. So even though they have a 30 armor, they are slightly tankier than you might think at first. They do have that weakness to fire though, so keep that in mind as well. They can be Vanguard deployed, and they are also immune to fear and terror. So for 550, that's a nasty package that you get for that cost. That exudes fear, can be Vanguard deployed, and has magical attacks. These things are pretty sweet, I think. For a 50 cost increase over their Eternal Guard without shield brethren, the Eternal Guards with shields have an additional 7 melee defense, and they have a 55% missile block chance. So if you are facing off against any faction that likes to bring any kind of ranged units, I would say spare the additional 50 and bring the ones with shields. That's it, simple as that. They have a 7 additional melee defense, and the 55% missile block chance makes them more than worth it. And next we are moving on to the War Dancers, the first of the two. This War Dancer for 800, they are dual wielding. They look awesome. They are forest stalkers. They are, I don't know what Shadow Dances of Loic necessarily means. But anyway, for the melee stats here, they have 60 models in the unit. Armor of only 15, but they do have the physical resistance of 20%. Leadership of 70, speed of 48. They are insanely fast for an infantry unit. Melee attack of 49, melee defense of 34, weapon strength of 40, which is pretty high. They're kind of like, kind of remind me of Forsaken a little bit, just not as armored, and maybe slightly less weapon strength. And then a charge bonus of 22. But what's really cool about them, on top of them having the physical resistance they can hide, they are also immune to psychology, so no fear or terror for these ladies. Then they also have the Shadow's Coil. So this is a 30-second augment that you have to activate yourself, and you will increase their melee defense, lower the melee attacks. So if you need to, you can make them more durable in melee with a 54 weapon or melee defense and a 29 melee attack if you activate the Shadow's Coil. Very cool unit, and they just look awesome. They're fucking awesome. Then we have the War Dancers with the Azrai Spears. For 150 cost increase, you can see that you're going to be getting a lower, I shouldn't do it this way. You're going to get a lower melee attack, higher melee defense. Your weapon damage is going to change from normal strength to a armor focus / bonus versus large, and the charge bonus of 12. Now, they do have charge defense against large, which is really cool. They also have the immune to psychology. Their unique ability is going to be Woven Mist. So for 30 seconds, they get missile resistance increase and a lower melee defense. That can be useful in certain situations. I have tested them against shock cavalry in a couple situations. You can charge against things like the Chaos Knights with lances, so like the heavy shock cav Chaos Knights. You can charge them into the Chaos Knights, and you can still win in combat if you don't get cycle charged. If you are getting cycle charged by your opponent, if their opponent has micro to the extent where they can cycle charge, then they are going to lose if you are getting rear charged flank. Basically, if you do not have your charge defense versus large, you're going to lose. But if you can maintain prolonged combat against a shock cav, they can win one-on-one, again, if they're not being cycle charged. If your enemy does show a high micro ability, then I would try my best to make sure you utilize the charge defense versus large, because that's the only way they're going to win against like shock cavalry. But besides that, they are still awesome against any other like large monstrous creature in the game. And again, they just look awesome. I really like these war dancers. They're pretty awesome. And then we're going to move on to the Wildwood Rangers. So the Wildwood Rangers are kind of a unique unit here. They are also immune to psychology. They have the Force Stalker trait as well as the other, elves in this army. They have a unit size of 75 along with the Eternal Guard. Their armor is going to be 40, leadership of 70, which is not bad. Speed of 35, which is kind of in tow with the other elven units. Melee attack of 39, melee defense of 28, which is kind of low, but they are kind of like a greatsword infantry. It does call them glaive, and I guess it is kind of a glaive, because they have a bonus versus large of 12, armor piercing of 24, and normal weapon strength of 8. Kind of a unique unit, and a decently high charge bonus. Oh, before we move on, also the Guardians of the Wildwood. So as long as they are in a forest, they do have an increased leadership, and that's when they get their charge defense versus large, if they're in a forest. So keep that in mind, I guess. On the fence with those guys. Next, we are going to move on to the missile infantry of the Wood Elves, which they are pretty cool. The mainstay, the basic missile infantry here, we have the Glade Guard, and they come in 3 different forms: normal, Starfire Shafts, or Hagbane Tips. The normal basic Glade Guard is going to have the range of other archers in this game, like Bretonnian archers, crossbowmen, that type of thing, with the 160. Their melee stats are not the worst, so they can kind of handle themselves against like a zombie unit. Skeletal warriors a little bit, but they only have 15 armor. Their hit points not that high, so like they're really not meant to be in melee, but they can hold a little bit against very basic infantry. But besides that, what makes them kind of cool is that they have the fire whilst moving, but they only have a forward firing arc, so you can't like run backwards and fire. You have to be running at your enemy to actually do the fire whilst moving. Their missile damage of 19 is pretty low. It's kind of on par with the goblin infantry or the goblin archers, so that's not really that amazing, but fire whilst moving is not bad. Even though you have to charge your foe, like you can be running after running people, or people that are trying to run away from you, and you can run after them and still fire, so it's cool. But what really makes these people pretty sweet is going to be the Starfire Shafts and the Hagbane Tips for an additional 100 in cost. The Starfire Shafts are going to give them fire attacks that are also magical, and then also armor piercing focused. All of a sudden the Glade Guard become much more like damage potential, much more important with these Starfire Shafts and 100 cost increase. Anything that gives you armor piercing range damage is usually pretty good in my book. Then we also have the Hagbane Tips, which is going to grant them poison damage and still magical attacks. Again, there's so many ways for the Wood Elves to get magical attacks, so do not bring ethereal units against them, please. But yeah, so this is going to grant them the poison attack, so that's also pretty awesome. If you don't have the extra 100 to spend, I guess get the normal Glade Guard, but I just feel like these two are just so much better for just additional 100 cost increase. I think they're more worth it than the normal Glade Guard are. Poison damage is great, and obviously armor piercing damage and flaming attacks if you need them against certain opponents also is pretty cool. But again, keep in mind, they can only fire while moving forward, not backwards or side to side. And now we're going to move on to some very potentially nasty units here, the Deepwood Scouts, and then they also come with the Swift Shiver Shard form. So for 700, you're going to get a unit that can fire while moving in a 360-degree arc, so they can actually run away from an enemy and continue to fire. They can be Vanguard deployed, and they have Stalk. If a unit gets to them in melee, they are going to melt, like immediately, so you cannot let them get in melee. But that being said, they have 23 weapon damage, 140 range, which is going to be lower than even riflemen, so you got to kind of beware. You can't really get into a skirmish battle with crossbowmen that are facing you, or archers that are facing you, or even riflemen. But still, having a 360-degree firing arc, so you can just kind of kite melee infantry for days, because they have a really decent melee speed, running speed, and the firing in 360, it's just... These guys are going to be very annoying to deal with, and I'm sure there's probably going to be a lot of hate on forums for the Deepwood Scouts. Then you can also get the Deepwood Scout with the Swift Shiver Shards. This is going to lower their range down to 115, but it's going to make their attacks magical and missile damage 37 because they get 2 projectiles with each shot. So they're going to be a little riskier because they're lower range. So you're going to have to get them a little closer to the enemy units, but they also do come with the Vanguard deployment, fire while moving, and stalk. Again, in a 360-degree area, so you can kite any unit in the game. It's going to be very annoying, and the 37 missile damage is just so high. Again, I think you're going to see a lot of hate for these units. Then the elite missile infantry for the Wood Elves, the Way Watchers. For 1200, they are going to have armor-piercing missile damage, a range of 160, so they are on par with other normal foot archers. Only 18 ammunition, but that's still pretty high. They have okay melee stats, but still you do not want them to be engaged in melee with almost any other unit. You want these guys to be kiting enemy units around. They have the firewall's moving trait. They have Vanguard. They also have Stalk. They have the 360-degree firing arc. They also have Hawkish Precision, kind of like the Way Watcher hero. So their armor-piercing damage is going to be increased by an additional 25% as long as there are no enemy units within 70 meters of them. 1200 in cost, but since their range is 160, armor-piercing with Stalk, Vanguard, and Hawkish Precision, whew, these are going to be potentially nasty kiting archers. In my tests against the AI, they have been very successful. We're going to have to see how they perform in a multiplayer environment, but before we move on, I actually wanted to show you a battle where we have some Deepwood Scouts and I believe a Way Watcher that are going to be kiting enemy infantry, which is going to be their kind of ideal engagement, so you can see for yourself just potentially like how strong it is to be able to run away from somebody and still fire at them.
Will be done.
Lady of the Azrae. By Kurnos!
Armed and ready. Shall be done. Our bows are yours.
Daughter of Athalloren! Ready! Elenil!
Bows of Athalloren! Children of Athalloren! Bows of Athalloren! Listening! Without forward!
Lady of Athalloren! Acknowledged!
So in that mock battle, you can see the potential for how annoying and damaging these units can be when they are able to fire while running away from you. Now again, a mock battle in a situation where there is no cav to threaten them and also no flying units. But the thing is, against the Wood Elves, flying may not be an answer to the archers, because Wood Elves, in my experience from the test here, can actually dominate the skies, which we'll get into here in just a little bit. The weakness here, I think, is probably going to be a weakness against cav specifically, like heavy armored cav. But anyway, let's move on to the only cav that the Wood Elves have, which is going to be the Wild Riders, which come in normal or shielded version. For 1100, you get a pretty nasty melee cav here. They also just look awesome. Look at them. Like I'm sure I'm putting video up here so you can actually see their stags and just how awesome they look. But anyway, they have a 40 armor, so not that tanky there, but they do have the 20% physical resistance on top of that, which is always nice. They have a 70 leadership speed of 85, which is really fast, faster than any armored cav in the game. I'm almost like 100% sure. The only other like cav type unit I think that's that speed is going to be Centaurs. And then you have the war beasts like the hounds, which are going to be faster. But in terms of armored cav, which are going to be one of the downfalls to the Wild Riders, getting charged by, like, you know, Griffites, the Royal Outdoor Griffites, you know, Empire Knights, any of those heavy armor units. The good thing is they're faster than them, so you can't actually run away from those engagements that you don't want. But anyway, with the melee attack of 33, melee defense of 23, weapon strength of 42, which is pretty high, and then a charge bonus of 46, these are going to be able to potentially devastate any lower armored infantry, make quick strikes against enemy artillery positions, crossbowmen, riflemen, you know, those types of units. They are going to excel at getting in there and killing them and making them rout pretty quickly, because they also come with fear. They come with vanguard deployment. They can hide in the forest, and they also come with frenzy on top of all of this. They are pretty nasty melee cav in specific situations, as I listed before, against artillery and those types of situations. They can run in, strike really fast, and get out. Now, if you're going to know you're going to be going up against archers, an archer faction like Bretonnia, Empire, I would spend the extra 100 to get the shielded version, which is going to grant you an extra 6 melee defense. But the more important thing here is that you're going to get the 55% block chance. And if you time it right, if you bring like Orion and wait for his Horn of the Wild Hunt to give them even increased speed and charge bonus, these Wild Riders, I don't think I did a video of it, but they can knock out enemy crossbowmen, artillery positions very quickly when that Wild Hunt comes on. And since they're so fast, like, enemy ranged units don't have much time to even deal damage to them in the first place. So if you can isolate the ranged components or any other thing that's going to be susceptible to them, you know, like swordsmen, any infantry unit that doesn't have charge defense versus large, you know, and are not braced, they are going to be very good at taking them out. And they just look awesome. So many of the Wood Elf units just look awesome. So those are going to be the Wild Riders. Pretty expensive, but very useful in certain situations. Let's see. Let's move on to the Missile Cav and Chariots. Well, there's only going to be Missile Cav here. So we have the Glade Riders, which is going to be their basic skirmishing cavalry. 45 unit models to the unit. Again, they share the low armor attribute with a lot of the other Wood Elf units, so they are very squishy. Their leadership is pretty low. Their speed is 95, so the only things that can catch them, I think, are going to be like... Actually, let me just double check this. Are going to be like hounds? Maybe? Okay, so hounds have the same speed, so it's going to be hard to catch them. So besides them, you're going to have to rely on, like, Pegasus Knights, you know, things that are going to be fast. The point is, they are really fast, so you're not really going to be able to catch them in melee in most situations. They also have that Forest Stalker trait, so they're going to be faster even in forest. With that 10% increased speed, they're going to be more accurate in the forest, which is kind of weird, because it's not like the Wood Elves' arrows magically go through trees, so while they may be more accurate, their arrows are still going to be blocked by trees when they're in a forest. So if you can, like, maneuver your archer units to be just on the edge of the forest, so you're kind of considered in the terrain, but yet there's no real trees blocking your way, then they're going to be very dangerous. But that's going to be kind of a very specific setup for them to, I'm not going to say abuse, but just use their Forest Stalker trait. Anyway, besides that, they are very decent light cavalry if you need them to charge an enemy archer or very weak unit, or make them chase routing units off the field. They are very fast, so they are very useful in that situation of charging, again, routing units that just came back from running that don't have many units left or models left in their unit. You know, that type of situation. Chase units off the field. So they're definitely not bad. If you spend an additional 75, you can get the ones with the Hagbane tips, so you have a very mobile force that does poison damage now. That's always useful. And on top of that, they can be Vanguard deployed, and they also have the 360-degree fire while moving trait that other skirmishing cav in the game has as well. So they are pretty cool. Being able to have poison damage anywhere you want, because with a speed of 95, they can go anywhere in the field pretty quickly. That's potentially huge. Then we move on to one of the coolest units in the game here, the Hawk Riders, for 950. 18 models to the unit. Their defensive stats here with their armor, their melee defense, and their hit points, not that impressive, but they do have a speed of 110, which makes them one of the fastest units in the game, with the nerf to the Pegasus units, which now only move at 105. Yeah, I know. Not a huge nerf, but still, technically, they are one of the fastest units in the game now. Their melee attack, 24, melee defense of 17. Their weapon strength in melee is armor piercing focus with 34 armor piercing damage, and this can actually turn the tide in an air battle, which I'm going to show here in just a little bit. On top of that, they also have a 38 charge bonus, which guarantees that they're going to get a lot of decent damage done on the charge with their melee attack boosted by 38 for, I think, 10 to 15 seconds is how long that charge bonus lasts. Then they have 22 ammunition, a range of 140, which is lower than riflemen, but still, it's pretty high. They can fire while moving, but they do not have the 360-degree arc. They can only fire in front of them, so keep that in mind. And they have a missile damage of 38, which does appear to be high, but keep in mind there are only 18 of them. So they're still not as damaging as even like a basic Glade Guard, because Glade Guard have 60 units firing at 19 missile damage, while these people only have 18 firing at 38. So it is high, but there's only 18 of them. These are really cool, and what's the word I'm looking for? Like, just could be used in a lot of situations. The fact that they have such a high charge bonus and armor piercing, they could be used to charge down on enemy infantry, disrupt them, get a lot of damage in, and just charge out. You can charge them against flying lords, which I believe is what I'm going to be showing here in just a moment. They're just a very cool unit, and for 950 cost, I think they are more than worth it. And actually, you know what, before we move on, I'm going to show you the battle where I bring a Wood Elf Air Force to counteract a Empire Air Force. The typical Air Force you would see from Empire, which is generally Empire on a Griffin, 2 Empire Captains mounted on the Pegasus, Amber Wizard, and then the Manticore that the Amber Wizard can summon. Keep in mind that Potion of Toughness nerf, Empire Captains can no longer bring Potions of Toughness, just like the Paladins cannot bring them anymore, you know, Gorbles and all that. But the Air Force for other factions has now become weaker because their heroes can't bring those Potions of Toughness. That nerf doesn't even affect the Wood Elves at all, because none of their heroes that can fly even have access to potions anyway. So it's kind of like a secret buff to Wood Elves. Kinda. But anyway, let me dive into that Air Force battle between the Wood Elves and the Empire.
Trample them! Hunters! Rise, sons of Kurnos! To battle! Armed and ready! All ready! Very well. WARHAMMER! Swiftly! Ashley warrior! Understood. I stand ready. Ready to hunt. The forest calls. Ever ready. Orders understood. Deepwood Cavalry. Let's hunt! Lord of the Glade. To war! Cavalry! With swiftly! Ready to ride! Turn around! Ready!
So in that battle, I wanted to also point out that the amount of money I spent on the Wood Elf Air Force was within a couple hundred of the money spent in for the Empire Force. So cost efficient wise, you see how much the Wood Elves won in that. Now, that was against an AI, but that is also typically how most Air Force battles go. Everyone collides in one spot. The General of the Empire did pop his potions, so that's something that a human player would do, and you can see with that particular build how the Wood Elves won out. There's other builds you can do. I've tried builds that focused more on the Great Eagles and didn't have any of the Hawk Riders, and they still won handily with 2 additional Great Eagles, or maybe it was 3. The one build that doesn't really work, that's not cost efficient, is if you bring 2 Forest Dragons on top of the Glade Lord's Forest Dragon. There's just not enough units in the sky to take the hits. The thing is, why this works, I think, is because there's so many Hawk Riders around your Lords and around your, like, Great Eagles, so they're taking some of the damage away from your Lord so that he's not breaking as quickly. But anyway, that's just one of the builds. Feel free to experiment on your own. Wood Elves, if you want them to, can dominate the skies, I believe, wholeheartedly, 100%. So anyway, now we're going to move on to another pretty cool unit. The Sisters of Thorn. These Missile Cav look so awesome. They are just... There's so many cool looking Wood Elves units in this game. But anyway, they are going to effectively kind of be like Marauder Horsemen, in the fact that they have a 75 missile range. They throw javelins, but their javelins are going to be poison damage with a 41 weapon damage. Some of that is split with armor piercing and normal. So very high damaging poison units. 75 range is pretty low, but on par with other like Marauder Horsemen. They also make for kind of light cav with a weapon strength, a melee attack of 33, melee defense of 33, weapon strength of 29, charge bonus of 28, which is not bad. Again, kind of a light cav. They could be Vanguard deployed. They have the 50% physical resistance on top of their 15 armor. So that is very, very high. A very high leadership, very high speed. So you can put them anywhere you want them to be. They'll be there in moments with an 85 movement speed. You can have them poison units, do damage to units with their high javelin damage, and then also just run them in and run over crossbows, artillery, you know the weak units that these light cav can be effective against. But on top of all of this, on top of being Vanguard deployed, on top of being physical resistance, fire while moving, all this good stuff for 1,000 cost, they also have 2 spells which do not pull from your Winds of Magic. So they have Shield of Thorns, which we've seen from the Lore of Life, which is awesome that they can just buff themselves or anybody every 90 seconds. And then they also have the Curse of On Run Here, which is a beast lore spell, which you probably never really see, but since this is just a free spell, awesome. It slows enemy units in an area and lowers their accuracy. So you can, a potential combo here, you throw the Curse of On Run Here on a crossbow position. There's 3 crossbows, 4 Bretonnian archers. Throw that on them to lower their accuracy, and then you charge in your Wild Riders, so they take even less damage, and they just crush anything in their path, well, any light armored unit in their path. That's a potential combo with this free spell. Free spell. I mean, you gotta spend 1,000 for this unit, but this unit alone is pretty awesome. But on top of that, they get free spells. And they're pretty tanky with a 50% physical resistance and a very high leadership. Very awesome. They look awesome. They do awesome things. They have cool spells. Sisters of Thorn, awesome. I've said that word a lot, but good God, they're so cool. All right, then we're going to move on to the last category for the Wood Elves, the Monsters and Beasts. The Great Eagle, which you saw in that air battle video. So for 900, they have 3,000 hit points, 30 armor, which is not that high, 60 leadership, which is also not that high, speed of 110, which is very fast, melee attack of 40, which is not bad, melee defense of 28, which is not bad, 390 weapon strength, but then also a 61 charge bonus, and on top of that, they also cause fear. They are a pretty cheap flying unit that, as you can see in that last battle, can definitely help you win a battle against other air forces in this game. They, I think, are worth it. They're not necessarily like as good as a Manticore. They are 100 less, but still, they're pretty cool. They look awesome, and they are, I think, a nice addition to the Wood Elf Air Force. Then we move on to the Treekin, which are kind of like Chaos Spawn, Trolls, those type of monstrous infantry. They have that Forest Spirit trait, so that means their attacks are magical. They have the 20% physical resistance. Their armor is 80. They have very high hit points. Their speed of 35 is not bad. Melee defense of 54, I believe, makes them the highest melee defense of all monstrous infantry in the game. I believe. Oh, no, hold on. That's a fully upgraded Minotaur. 34, 46. Yeah, 30. So yeah, I believe they have the highest melee defense of any monstrous unit in the game. So it makes them very tanky because on top of all of their very high defense, they have 80 armor, a high set of hit points. They do disruptive attacks because they're monstrous infantry. Their weapon strength of 55 is not the highest out of all the monstrous infantry in the game, but they are relatively cheap, durable, and they can just hold in a fight for a long time. Also, it's kind of unique. They have a charge defense versus large. They're a large unit, which has defense against large units, which is kind of unique. They do also cause fear. They are a siege attacker, if that's a thing that you like. They do have the fire weakness because they are treekin. They have that physical resistance, which we went over later, and they are also immune to fear and terror, which is always a pretty cool thing. They are a very durable monstrous infantry unit, and I think they also look pretty cool. Treeman. Whoo, this is going to be the Wood Elves Giant. This thing kind of shares the same stats with the Ancient Treeman Lord, which we covered earlier. So they have 100 armor, 90 leadership, which is so high, 6,000 hit points, very high. They also have the charge defense against other large foes, which is a cool thing to have. They have the 4 spirit traits, so their attacks are magical. Physical resistance 20%. They are weak to fire. They cause fear. They cause terror. They, again, have the charge defense. 500 weapon strength, 30 charge bonus. Very solid unit for 1,600. Very curious that these units have the charge defense versus large foes. I don't think most other giants have that in the game. I think that's pretty unique to just the Wood Elves. Yeah, like not many large creatures in this game have charge defense. So, I know that's just, it's a unique thing that they have. And plus the treemen are, again, a common theme. They look awesome. And they cause fear and terror, which always is a good thing to have. Then the last, but certainly not least, is going to be the Forest Dragon you can bring for 2,000 gold. They have the Forest Spirit trait, magical attacks, physical resistance 20%, 70 armor, a decent set of hit points for a flying creature. They have the missile resistance of 25 because of their scaly skin, speed of 90, which makes them very fast. Their melee attack is also poison, which we saw when we mounted the Glade Lords on their Forest Dragon mounts. They are armor piercing of 450 and charge bonus of 63, causing fear and terror. Also siege attacker if that's your thing. Now, they can't win in a straight up like 1v1 against a general of the Empire, against like a King Lewin the Yonkur, but they are definitely a nice asset to have in your air battle. And of course they can terrorize ground units. They can go anywhere they want, apply terror, apply fear. An awesome unit. They do cost a lot of money, but just look at them. I mean, I probably don't have a video up right now, but I did before, but they are so awesome. They just look so awesome. And that's going to be it. That's the last unit for the Wood Elves. In my tests against AI, this seems like a very high micro army that has so much damage potential, and they are a glass cannon focus, which means if they do get caught in melee, they are going to melt for at least most of these units. But man, they can dominate the sky. They can dominate melee infantry with all of the ability to kite them to death. Their greatest weakness, I think, is going to be armored cav for the most part, because they don't have many things to stop them. The armored cav, well, I mean, they have like spear units and stuff, but I think that's going to be the weakest part of their army, is going to be threatened by armored cav, or cav in general, I guess. But yeah, they seem like a super solid, a very unique way to play the game. I really love Total Warhammer because so many of these races just feel so unique. They have their own playstyles. Dwarves are, you know, super tanky, super durable. They're meant to last a long time. Vampire counts can regenerate and also supposed to last a long time. Summon units. Wood Elves. Annoying Wood Elves that kite you to death. Like, it's just so cool. This game is just awesome. So again, that is going to be the coverage of the Wood Elves, but this is not going to be over quite yet because there are additional changes to this game. Let's move on to the Beastmen. They have 2 new units with this DLC. They have Morgur the Shadowgrave, a new lord that you can play as. This guy potentially is crazy. So he has regeneration, which is cool. Foe Seeker, the Apocalyptic Vision, which is shared with the Beast Lord. But he also has Spirit Essence of Chaos. He can do this 2 times. It is on cooldown at the beginning of a battle, so keep that in mind. But when an enemy unit that is not a lord or hero is below 20% hit points, so near death, you can cast this on them and you will spawn a unit of Chaos Spawn that are affected by that new summoning change. So they are going to have that unbinding trait, so they are going to slowly die. But still, you can finish off the unit that you cast this on, because they will just die, and then you get a chaos spawn out of it. On top of that, you equip this item, which also begins the match on cooldown, and you just summon chaos spawn. There are 4 chaos spawn potential summons, if you use this ability right, that this dude can do in a battle. How crazy is that? How crazy is that? It's pretty, well, it's pretty awesome. But let's go over his stats. 4,000 hit points is not bad. 15 armor is very low. Leadership is decent. Speed is very high for a unit that's on foot. Melee attack of poison 55, melee defense of 45, weapon strength of 400, and charge bonus of 56 makes this a decent melee combatant. Decent, but will still lose against, like, you know, Grimgor and the likes of Grimgor. But good God, he can cast up to 4 chaos spawn in a match, and that's unique and cool. And I'm not sure how that's going to affect the balance in multiplayer, but it sounds awesome. With the Staff of Ruinous Corruption equipped, he is going to cost over 2,000, but I think it is more than worth it, even with the changes to the summoning, which makes them die a slow death over the course of the match. It's still pretty cool. And then on top of that, the other change to the Beastmen is, well, one, I believe their Frenzy skill is fixed, because that has been bugged. So, like, most of these, oh, the Primal Fury, I think, was bugged, and I think that's now been fixed, so it works properly. But the new unit that was added is going to be the Harpies. These are so cool. Probably not going to be effective against Wood Elves, but in other situations are so cool. They are flying melee infantry. This is kind of important because they are not going to be weak to, like, spearmen. They are not considered large creatures. They are very fast with an 82 movement speed. Their leadership is not great. They are not that durable, but they have a decent melee attack when combined with their charge bonus of 20. They have a very high melee defense for this kind of cheap unit, and a weapon strength of 44 with 45 units or models in the unit. And they are also Vanguard deployed. So, I mean, they're flying melee infantry. You want to reach those crossbows, you want to reach that artillery, but you're so annoyed that you're being blocked by, you know, rows of spearmen, rows of halberdiers. Don't worry, you can just fly these harpies over the lines of enemy infantry and get them into the squishier bits behind them. But you do have to be careful. They don't have any kind of missile resistance. They are going to be susceptible to missile focused fire, so you're going to have to kind of whip them around the flanks, try and make sure that they are staying out of the arc of the enemy crossbows. But they are also still decent at just fighting other low tier infantry like swordsmen, spearmen. You don't have to worry about it because they're not giant creatures. They're just normal sized creatures. They're just flying melee infantry. For 600 in cost, they're not bad. I think they're a very cool addition to the Beastmen. They give them some kind of flying mobility, which is always a nice thing to have. But it's going to be situational. It's going to be hard to bring them in a fight against Empire, Bretonnia, Wood Elves, Chaos, okay, against a lot of factions. Because against those factions, you have a potential of facing against a lot of air units, which will most likely dominate these harpies in the sky. But still, a very nice addition, and I do have a video here to show off Morgur the Shadowgrave, including his crazy summoning abilities, and some of these harpies, along with some Ungor Spear against, I think it's Empire, or maybe Bretonnia, I can't remember. But anyway, let me show you that video right here.
Encores! Kill them all!
Retreat! Dark beast! Dark
So there you go. He can summon a lot of spawn. A couple things before we moved on here that I forgot to cover initially. He is immune to the terror and fear, but this is a big deal. He has a 75% resistance to missiles and to magic. So a tactic you can use in certain situations if you have a Fire Lord is casting a fireball on a very low armored unit like Morgdur. But I did test this out, and with that resistance of 75%, even a fireball directly casted above him so that he gets hit by the fireball and the explosion, it doesn't really do much to him at all. So it's going to be hard to snipe him that way. But he is still not the most durable of units in melee. So, you know, keep your Gorbles nearby because the enemy is not going to want to have you casting up to 4 different chaos spawns. So their anti-hero, anti-lord squads are going to be after Morgdur. So again, make sure you are protecting him with your Gorbles and, well, mainly just your Gorbles. Make sure they're around there to intercept the heroes and enemy lords that are going to be coming after Morgdur in your battles as the multiplayer population realizes how crazy he can be the longer he stays in battle and summons more of these free chaos spawn. So that's going to be the changes to the Beastmen I'm going to be covering here. Next, we're going to move on very briefly to... Right. And now moving on to the 2, I believe, free LC Wizard additions to the Empire. We have the Grey Wizard, or aka Gandalf the Grey, which is going to have access to the Lore of Shadows. They are mounted on a Warhorse, a Barded Warhorse, and an Imperial Pegasus. Their stats are kind of reflective on other casters in this game, so nothing too impressive there. They do also have access to the Smoke and Mirrors if you want your army to be a little bit faster for the Empire, and Arcane Conduit, as well as access to the Scrolls, and again, the Lore of Shadow that has been introduced in this patch. And then we also have the Jade Wizard, which is going to be the Lore of Life Wizard added to the Empire arsenal. He has access to the Life Bloom ability, which is potentially crazy that the Empire now has access to all this regeneration. We'll see how it pans out in multiplayer, but they have that ability, Arcane Conduit, and again, the Lore of Life spells now is in the Empire's arsenal. Again, melee stat-wise, not that impressive, and the mounts, the same thing as the other wizards for the Empire. And I believe that's the only additions for the Empire's army. Then, also, this is kind of a surprise to me, and at the time of this recording, I don't know if this has been confirmed, because I have not heard any news about this. I just noticed this as I was going through the armies. The Vampire of Shadow. Again, I've looked and I haven't seen any news on this being a new unit, but hey, here she is. The vampire counts apparently have access to the Lore of Shadows, so they too can also get a faster army with the Smoke and Mirrors with this vampire lady. In terms of looks, she looks like the Vampire of Death, but she has a veil over her face. There you go. Very surprised. I don't know by the time that this video is released, maybe they would have announced that she's going to be added, but this was a shock to me. I was like, what? I was like, what the heck? What is this? So yeah, Lore of Shadows. Vampire counts now have access to that as well. And I believe that is all of the new units added. So very quickly, cover some of the changes in the patch that's going to be released with the Wood Elves. One of the big changes we've already covered, which is going to be the change to Potions of Toughness, how the heroes don't have access to them. Another thing that was changed is going to be Chariots. Chariots, for the most part, are going to be increased with some of their stats, like melee defense, bonus versus infantry, that type of stuff, but they are also going to be able to pull out of battle easier. I believe they may have a bigger mass. Maybe that's not right. But they are going to be able to pull out a battle easier. They're basically just been buffed. So I wanted to do a video showing the, I believe it's going to be the Gore Beast Chariot for Chaos in a battle against, I believe, Dwarves, and show you how effective, or maybe against Vampire Counts, how effective that the new Chariot build can be. And they can actually pull out of combat a lot easier than they could before. So Chariots may be a thing in future multiplayer battles. Just going to say that now. But let me show you the video that I did with the Chariots. Again, this is going to be a mock battle versus AI, not an actual live battle, but still, you'll get the point.
Yes? The dark gods command me!
So in that video, I showed you an example of charging through the backs of units and then escaping through your own, and then what can happen if you catch a unit out in the open, and how the chariots can just tear them to pieces. Now again, that was against the AI, not a human opponent. We'll have to see what it's like in an actual multiplayer live environment, but for the tests that I have done, the chariots do definitely seem improved and may actually be worthwhile taking into multiplayer. Even though they will still be very micro intensive, they do seem to be a lot more effective. Then the next change, I wanted to show the units of renown, the ranged units of renown, so like the Durthu Errors and the Sterling's Revenge, and what are these things called? The Silver Bullets. Their accuracy has been changed so that it reflects what a unit would be with its 9 rank improvement. So basically they became more accurate. On top of that, the Free Company Militia got a decrease in cost by, I believe, 50, and then their accuracy was also increased. So I love Free Company Militia. I didn't think they're really a viable unit in most cases, but I do love the concept of them. I love the way they look. So I did record a quick, again, another mock battle showing the Sterling's Revenge, a couple Free Company Militia that are going to be backed up by a Jade Wizard. So they're going to have some regeneration buffs as well. So hope you enjoyed this one.
We obey! Hunt!
Oh! Send these things back to your realm!
Tyrant falls! Let the wind of life blow! Sterling's Revenge! The Heldenhammer! Sterling's Revenge! General! Yes, sir! Yes, sir! Quickly!
Sigma close!
Stalin's revenge! Prepare for combat! Return to duty! Victory will be ours! For the Emperor!
By God, Marat!
So there you see a situation where Free Company Militia can potentially hold out against higher tier infantry, especially when they are backed up by the Jade Wizard that can cast those AoE heal spells. And since the Jade Wizard has access to the, what was it called again? Life Bloom ability, so any spell he's casting, all your units are regenerating. It basically makes them be able to hold out longer. And ideally, if you can get the Sterling's Revenge in a flanking position, which is where they kind of want to be, they can deal a ton of damage. Go figure. So that is going to be all of the videos and most of the coverage for the Wood Elf patch that I'm going to be showing. There are other changes that the patch is bringing, and again, feel free to check that out for yourself in the link below that I'm going to provide. And I'm just going to end this video with a quick rundown of the campaigns, because there's going to be a minor campaign, the Season of Revelation, where you can play as either the Wood Elves or Arguillan. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Wood Elves is going to be Orion, Arguillan is going to be Durthu. These are the same two legendary lures that you can also bring in the Grand Campaign. The focus of both of these seem to be the same. The mini campaign here is isolated to the region of the Wood Elves and some of the Bretonnian lords, so it's going to be on like the west coast of the Grand Campaign. Actually, here we can just start this up so you can see how big this map is going to be. So here is going to be the map for the smaller mini campaign for the Wood Elves. It does look rather large, but the actual area, how can we see? Here we go. So the actual area is going to be that little Wood Elf forest that you see on the Grand Campaign, and then some of the territory for the Bretonnian lords. You can see we have the Carcassonne, and it goes up to Mousillon, which is going to be like the vampire Bretonnians, right? That's what they are. So it's an isolated part of the main world, which most of these mini campaigns are going to be. Then the Grand Campaign is going to be, well, the size of the normal Grand Campaign. The main thing about the Wood Elves is going to be the resource Amber. The victory condition in both the Mini Campaign and the Grand Campaign is going to be upgrading this Oak of Ages, which you can see requires the unique resource of Amber. Amber is achieved through military alliances, through conquering settlements, through vassalization, and quest battles. You have to spend Amber not only on upgrading the Oak of Ages, but there's also other buildings that the Wood Elves have which require Amber. There are units that are usually the elite units of the Wood Elves that require Amber to create, and then also certain technologies which are very powerful will also require the Amber. Amber is not like gold in that you get it each turn. Amber is just a pool that you have, and it gets larger with the more settlements that you conquer. So if we conquer this place, we'll have an additional Amber, so we'll be up to a +2, which can then either be utilized to have another high tier unit, another technology, or try to pull up enough so that you can upgrade the Oak of Ages, which again is the main victory condition. If we look at here, you have to ensure that it is up to a thriving state, and that's really it. And you can see the Oak of Ages, it starts in the dormant. To get up to thriving, we're going to require, what is it, 51? Yeah, 51 Amber in total. And again, you don't accumulate those every turn like gold. It's just a pool, so you're forced to go out there, forge alliances, conquer a bunch of settlements. Speaking of, the Wood Elves can also conquer any settlement in the game, and that's going to produce Amber for them. The only thing is, though, each settlement can only, that's outside of the Wood Elf territory, I believe, can only produce one building, so they are very minimal in what they can actually do. But you can conquer every single settlement in the game as the Wood Elves, which is going to be unique for their playstyle, and is going to be required to get enough Amber to get high tier units, technologies, and the Oak of Ages upgraded. And that is going to be just a very brief rundown of the Wood Elves and how they play. I can just show you quickly here what units they are going to start with, depending on which legendary lord you pick. So for the Wood Elves, which is going to be aka Orion, You're going to start with a group of Wild Riders, the Eternal Guard, and a group of Deepwood Scouts. His unique Lord effects is that he has the upkeep and recruitment cost minus 50% for the Wild Rider units, leadership plus 10 during forest battles, and the elite forest spirit units, so like the dragons, the tree folk, and all that are going to cost amber for him. Then for Durthu, he has the Wild Riders, the Treekin, and a Dryad unit. His hero recruitment costs for the branch wraiths, which are those ones that can cast some lore of shadow and some lore of life, are going to be decreased. All units in his army are immune to all attrition, so you can put this dude up into the Chaos Wastes, conquer all the Chaos Wastes with no attrition, which is such a huge thing. Trying to conquer those Chaos tribes up there is so hard because of attrition, and you don't have to worry about that as long as you bring Durthu up there. And also melee attack plus 10 during forest battles, and the elite Elven units for him are going to cost the amber. So that is going to be the unique things for Durthu and Orion. Plus, he just looks awesome. Look at that dude. And that's it, everybody. I know it's a very long video, as most of these overviews are, but that is going to be a rundown of all of the new Wood Elf units, the Empire units, some of the patch note changes, and the new Beastmen units as well. So hope you enjoyed this video, everybody, and I hope you also enjoy the Wood Elves. They are a very unique faction with a different playstyle that may take some getting used to, and that I'm sure is going to upset a lot of people in multiplayer, and that also have just a totally cool, unique single-player campaign that I plan to actually play through, and I'm really excited to dive into that and show you some of their campaign for maybe their mini campaign, grand campaign, and also probably co-op with my buddy Surreal. We're going to try and make that happen as well. So again, hope you enjoyed the video, everybody, and I hope you all have a great day. Take care.